In a previous video I showed you how to use video textures, but what if you don't want to use a video texture? But what if you want to render an in-game camera to a texture to display on a material? Well, luckily for you, that is something that is actually remarkably easy to do as well. So let's make like a little CCTV type of thing, right? So the way we'll do that is we're just going to make a new blueprint class here. We'll make that an actor. I'll call that TV for now. And just as a very rough blocking out, what I'll just do is I'll add 2 cubes. One cube here will be displaying the actual TV screen, and then the other cube will just be slightly bigger. So something like 1.1 in scale. Pull that back. This way we can fake it being a TV relatively easily. And we'll parent that to that so that they always move together. Now, what we want to add next is a scene capture 2D. This is just a camera, and this camera will output to a render target. And that render target we can then use as like a material thing, and everything will be fine working like that. So let's create a render target, which we can do in textures, and then we can use a canvas render target or just a render target. For this, a normal render target will do fine, because we are just going to take the scene capture and put it into the render target. The canvas render targets can also like manually be drawn onto, which is something that I'm going to be using in a upcoming video at some point to make a basic snow walking system. For now though, let's use a normal render target, and we'll just call that the TV render target. Important to note though is because this is an asset, if you have multiple of these TVs, you're going to need one render target for each of them. Because this is directly going to influence that asset. So if you have multiple things influencing that asset, only one of them can write to it at a time. So the best way to deal with that is to just go into your construction script and use the set texture target node. The way you can use that is just to promote that to a variable and expose that. Now we can set whatever texture target we need on a per actor basis in the world. So if we just put the TV into the world here, let's rotate this around so we can actually see what's happening with it. We'll have the texture target here as a exposed parameter, which we can put pretty much any render target we want into here. I've got a couple because this is just my playing around project, but we're going to be using the TV render target, of course, which will now just render anything onto that render target that this camera sees, or rather this scene capture component. So if we open up this render target here, we can see, okay, that's its view. But if we just leave that hanging open and I change the field of view, you can see it immediately has an effect. I think something like 110 will probably be pretty good for like a CCTV. Usually those are a little bit wide angle. But now how do we use this in a material? You wouldn't believe it, but it's actually remarkably easy to use this in a material. The way we're going to do that is we're going to first make a new material, which I'll just call TV material or something like that. And in there, we're going to add a texture sample. And in there, we can just use the TV render target that we just made as a texture. It's just that easy. It's very much similar to setting up a material for a video texture, if you've seen that video as well. I'm going to use the emissive color here as the output, because I like screens and televisions to actually emit color into the world. Multiply that by like 2. And now, since it's a CCTV feed that we're doing, let's also, maybe instead of using the RGB, what we could do is either just use one of the channels or desaturate it first, so it'll be black and white. I think that'll be kind of nice. And while we're at it, might as well just add some noise to it as well, because, you know, why not? Really. Maybe divide the noise value by like 10 to have be a little bit more subtle. And in order to see things a little bit better, what I'll do is I'll add some cheap contrast here. And let's add that just after the desaturation before the multiplying. I think that makes the most sense. Just like 0.1, just to have a little bit more contrast to things. And ideally, you might also want this noise to move. We're not going to worry about that for the time being. So now that we have that set up, let's go back into our TV and into our cube over here. And we also want to make this material, so set material, we want to just make that a variable as well, which we will expose and connect that up. So now we've got this material variable here, which we can set to our TV material, and that will now show up on here as being our little screen. We can now move around the specific scene capture component that we've added into any location that we want, really, any position that we want, just like any normal camera. So let's rotate this around a little bit like that, maybe a little down, really give it like that security cam footage kind of perspective. And now we'll be able to see if we walk around here. It might be hard to see, but we have our little player character walking around in there. Just for demonstration purposes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into our scene capture component, and I'm actually going to set this back to like a field of view of about 50, just so that everything is a little bit bigger on screen and we can actually see like our character walking around decently well. And that's how we make a camera into a texture that we can use in a material. Now, do be aware that you want to be really, really careful with all of this, because this really gets very, very resource intensive very quickly, because we're effectively double rendering cameras, right? And it all depends on the resolution of your render target. So we made this render target here, and at the moment that's 256 by 256. If we make this like 1024 by 1024, we're going to have a lot more like detail in there, which is going to make things look a lot better, especially if they're like big on screen. It's also going to make the rendering a lot more intensive, and as such going to impact your performance a lot more. This is the kind of technique that you will see in like driving games with like rear view mirrors and such. They usually have like a scene capture camera that's just projecting onto a texture on the mirror. Usually there's a reason that rear view mirrors in games are kind of shit and low resolution, because don't try to render two full cameras at the same time. Try to keep the resolution as low as humanly possible. Anyway, that's how you can use these render targets to render an in-game camera to whatever texture you need. And a very big thank you to all of my Patreons. You can see them on screen right now. If you want to help out supporting the channel, there's a link down below in the description to the Patreon page. And a special thanks to my Cave Digger tier Patreons, Sir J. Thomas,